I'm just gonna say right off the back that this is gonna be a bit of a long video, so forgive me. But stay through to the whole end. It's gonna get interesting. I saw this video a while back. It's by Sweet Anita, and she oddly names this I dated a simp, cringy stories. Now, we're going to delve deep into this one as people who are red pill mind. We're going to dive deep into this video. And this video is full of red flags and a lot of, I would say, like shaming sort of mentality towards men. Now, we're going to preface this video by stating, for the most part, overwhelmingly, male spaces have been invaded by women. From, like men, older men can't have, they always talk about like uh, their cigar clubs or, the boys clubs, etc. Right? Like, for example, like the Boy Scouts. Right now, the women have invaded the Boy Scouts, and they're like, we can be in the Boy Scouts, but we're still gonna have Girl Scouts, but you can't have Boy Scouts. And typically, these are the areas where men can, of course, get together and they can bond and teach younger men and younger boys um, how to come of age. How to come of age. And of course, women do this. Women do these things as well. They pass on teachings and understandings and life experiences onto the younger generations. But for the most part, we've seen that that is looked down upon when it comes to men, right? For the most part, even with just having fathers involved with, their kids, for the most, especially here in America, that is looked down upon, which is why you see such a high divorce rate. Government overwhelmingly favors women in terms of giving them custody. I think it's like almost 90% of all custody cases are given to women. Now, with that out of the way, this video is of Sweet Anita. Sweet Anita, of course, is a streamer. She's a YouTuber. She's got a big following. I think she's got 1.27 million. This video has about 900,000 views with 43,000 likes. Now, this video absolves her of all responsibility for her actions and throws all of the weight of the responsibility for her actions upon the men that she interacted with. Now, granted, this video is dated is labeled "I dated a simp," right? So men are the ones who are responsible for relationships. Women typically are the ones who are responsible for sex, right? We're going to go into this video, take a listen. She does have tics, so you'll hear like she'll have like either movements or facial expressions, or she'll say things, but that's just part of the diagnosis that she has. Now, with that, so we're going to pay attention, and we'll view this, of course, from the standpoint of the red pill lens.
With you, please marry me, please take me, I love you. Wow, wait, another educational stream? And sat and had to think about what I want to chat about today, and I thought about you guys and how awesome you are. Flips, you all suck. And I thought about.
So I just want to say, at the very beginning of the video, where you see like she premises the overreaction, right? I love you, I want to date you, etc. I really don't think men act that way. I think men get pushed into that direction. Maybe you might come across someone that does that. Very unusual for anybody. And of course, that's how she premises the video, that the simp sort of thinking is this, overly, I love you, I can't live without you sort of mentality, or as she expressed it. But when you actually watch her video, I want you to pay attention to her actions. She tells on herself, so much in this video, which most women do. Most women, you just let women speak, and women just tell on themselves. And then you don't even have to ask questions. As a man, you should be able to deduce what sort of woman you are sitting in front of.
I thought about Kat. I thought about some of the simps that I dated, and I didn't realize that they were simps, because I didn't really realize what simp was. I thought it was just like the new word for cuck or white knight or whatever. But actually, those words are completely different.
Now, like I've said in other of my videos, like, if you wonder about why you keep meeting these type of people, it's more than likely a reflection of you, even though people might not like that. But if you find yourself dating these people, right? If you find yourself dating these people, then overwhelmingly it's a reflection on you. It's not just, let's point all the blame on them. It is a hard mirror look of who you are as an individual, that more than likely that's all that she was going to get. I mean, regardless of being attractive, you can just tell in the video, we'll just watch it. She tells on herself throughout the whole video.
And we're going to be chatting about that today so that you realize when you've been entangled with a simp and you don't make the same mistakes I did. Because it might sound awesome to have a dude or a lady who's like worshipping your feet and overfluffing your ego and just buying you things all the time, being super, super nice because please like me, oh my god, I was so alone. But it's not good and it can get pretty toxic pretty fast. And so, like, yeah, I'm all about learning shit from my past and then passing on those tools to someone else so they don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Let's do that today. I think that's...
Now, let's keep in mind that she is a Twitch streamer, and overwhelmingly, most of the men that follow her are the same type, right? What she refers to about learning from her experiences, people have called her out for exploiting many of these young men for money, right? There's been numerous videos, you can Google them, and where people basically have been exposing a lot of these women for taking advantage of simps, which is why, of course, Twitch recently came out with that video or that policy where they're going to ban people from shaming men by referring to them as simps, because that's where most of their bread and butter, especially for these female streamers, comes from. It comes from men who just basically throw money at the screen for these women because they are simping for them. And so even though she says, she's learned from experience, in my opinion, she is exploiting most of these young men because of her experience. It's her experience that has taught her how to navigate the YouTube and Twitch environment.
I just want to say that I'm not having this chat to denigrate anyone that I've previously dated, and I would hope that you guys take a very understanding viewpoint on this. Please, you don't raise anyone up, not even yourself, by bringing anyone down, so try not to look down on anyone in this story, okay? Simp is a term I've never seen ever. Really? Okay. So simp is usually someone who, there's an acronym for it, but I won't be saying that on stream. I think it's rather inappropriate. But suffice it to say that simp...
Now, did you hear that part? So it's not that, because simp stands basically for women, male, or should say men, who are basically putting, right, the last part, mediocre sleeve or pussy on a pedestal. That's basically what it means. It's men who are taking these women who are just, as they say, basic women, and they're putting them on a pedestal as if they were, the most amazing things. And of course, that's why she doesn't want to talk about that, because she is, for the most part, just a very basic woman.
Simps are usually men, but they can be women too, who are obsessed with trying to sleep with women, but tend to not be very desirable, tend to be very socially awkward, tend to be not the kind of person that would be very successful in dating, not just because of their looks or anything, but because of their overall demeanor and desperation. And they tend to behave in very desperate ways that are very transparent, because they don't know how to interact with women, but they're obsessed with them, and they're obsessed with trying to get sex.
And I would say from the very beginning that I kind of disagree with what she said, or or that kind of concept. The reason that most of these men act this way is because it does work to some extent. And for the most part, most men were raised to look at women as like to do stuff for, right? Which is why most husbands talk about the honey-do list, right? The list of things that women want you to do for them when you end up getting married. A list of chores, etc. And that's typically how women are. Women need to have things done for them because overwhelmingly it becomes very difficult for them to navigate the world, which is why, for the most part, no matter where you go in the world, everything is run and maintained and built by men. And so we're going to go into that. And so that's why men act that way, is because everywhere men go, everywhere men go, every country that men go, every province, etc., they see men taking care of women. And so so young boys learn this just by nature, just by observable reality, that women, for the most part, need to be taken care of, which is why this is what they refer to as simping.
Example of a simp would be someone who pays so much focus and attention to a girl even though she's in a relationship because they think there's like some sort of queuing system and they'll be next in line. So they're the kind of guy who's like super nice to you and gives you loads of stuff, pays lots of attention to you, lends an ear whenever, you know, you want to bitch about your boyfriend or whatever. And then the minute you break up with them, they profess that undying love and go, clearly we're going to be together now. They're the
And I would say that's typically the reality. When I've dated women and I was like, you know what, I'm done with you. And I knew that they had male orbiters. And so I would question, like, why are you, you're speaking too much. And of course, I was like, why are you speaking to this individual? Why do you have all these other men? And I would just be like, you know what, I'm done. I'll just move on to the next woman. And eventually they would contact me and I would find out, or through their social media, that they were dating those exact same people, right? Those exact same people, they would just monkey branch over to whoever was next for the time being. And this happened in my most recent relationship a couple of years ago. I was dating this Philippine girl and I was very busy. I was busy with a lot of work. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to be able to spend because I was just busy working. And I wasn't going to put her desire to be with me all the time to interfere with my work. And so I remember one day she told me later on about some guy. She was like, oh yeah, because she wanted me to meet her friends at some club here in Astoria in Queens. And later on, she told me that that person gave her a number. She was like, oh yeah, there was this weird guy who tried talking to me when I was with all my friends. After I broke up with her, she ended up dating that guy. Granted, she still came back to my place and she would still sleep with me because she wanted to be with me. And that guy was just a filler for the moment, even though he wanted a relationship. And she was like, oh, he's a real man because he was straightforward about not wanting to put up with female BS. And that he was like, you can't go out and hang out with all these other guys. But she still did it behind his back. She would still come by. She was still contacting me because in reality, she wanted to be with me. And she ended up going with this other dude, even though he had more money than I did. Because a lot of times that's not all that relevant when it comes to attraction. But what she says about how men think that the woman will just monkey branch and you'll be next in line, that is often a reality. Observable reality tells men otherwise. And of course, women like to pretend like this is not part of female narrative.
Kind of person who sells all their stuff so that they can donate like thousands of pounds to their favorite e-girl, and then they live off noodles for the rest of the month. They're the kind of person who will go on a date and instead of looking for social cues that she's interested and take things step by step, they're so profoundly desperate for love and attention and so profoundly desperate to get inside somebody that they'll just go, I love you, like straight off the bat. They'll be like, so what you gonna order? And they're like, I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Please marry me. Please take me. I love you. Fucking, oh my God, please, I love you. Please, where are you going? Come back. I love you.
Now she's obviously over exaggerating, but of course that is with a purpose, that these men, and she's literally low-key dissing men, like straight up. She's low-key dissing men and most of the men who follow her, right? Because as she said, the people who donate to her, most of the men that waste their money donating to her are literally simping for her. They're thinking that if they donate to her, that they'll get some sort of, they get attention from her, because maybe they wouldn't be able to garner her attention in real life, right? They wouldn't be able to go up to this person on the street and talk to them, get their number, interact with them, etc. So they do it through social media. They do it through Twitch and through donating. Now, she literally throws all of these men under the bus by her extreme view that this is what they do. But as she said, that she's the one that goes out with these men. She's the one that goes out with these type of individuals. Now, if you listen to her, which we'll listen to later on in the video, where she leads a lot of these men on, right? It's not that men just by nature do these things, out of no reason. Men do a lot of these things that she describes in the very beginning about being nice and like buying things for women because they're interested in them. And these women know that. They know that these men have an interest in them and they use that to exploit them. And then once these men are thinking that she's being interested, then it turns around as from her viewpoint, because she's just been using them. Like from her standpoint, she's just using these individuals, which she goes into in her whole "I dated a simp."
Because they're just like, oh, they're like in a frenzy. Like their loneliness is compounded by their low self-esteem, and so they alternate between self-loathing and desperation, and the only validation they can think of that will make them feel less awful about themselves is how women feel about them. Yeah, okay, so I've had a few experiences with simps. My earliest one was when I was at school, and there used to be these boys, and they were really nerdy, and they liked playing card games and Warhammer, and they liked to stay at home and play computer games, and they weren't particularly sportsy, and they didn't have great social skills. They had a lot of body odor, and they were kind of like a stereotype, and I felt flawed, and I felt.
And in case you're not paying attention, all the terms that she's using are negative terms towards the men, right? They're nerdy, they're not very popular, they weren't the what did she say? They weren't the sportsy type. Like as you can see from what she's saying, these are all negative connotations about the men that she's interacting with, but she's the one who's interacting with them.
Kind of like inherently like I would never be able to fit in anywhere, and so I kind of related to these guys and sympathized with them. So when they started coming over to me and saying, "What are you drawing? What are you doing?" I kind of felt like, wow. I kind of felt like I could.
Now I can just imagine as someone who, especially as young kids, are cruel. So you could imagine as a young kid, I think she was like, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old from this experience. That obviously the younger girls, probably didn't have interaction, because young girls would be like, why are you hanging out, with these nerdy boys, etc. Right? She would stick to her own kind. That's typically what went on in elementary school, and for the most part until you get out of school and you realize life is really not like that. And so her being alone and isolated is what drew her to these type of young boys.
Speak to these guys because they were flawed like me, and so we'd all hide together in this classroom away from all the bullies and all the people in breakfast in the playground. We'd just hang out together, and they'd play card games and stuff, and one by one of them would come over and compliment me on my drawing skills and be super nice to me, and they'd bring me treats and they'd bring me sweets, and they were just giving me offerings, and I just had this herd of nerds following me around, and they were giving me stuff, and they were being so nice, and I thought, wow, I have friends. This is friendship. But really, low-key, they were all desperate to be my boyfriend, and I didn't know this until quite late. So two of them in particular.
And I would wonder, where was this young woman's father? Because typically these are the things that, like mothers and fathers teach their daughters. Be careful not to get involved with boys, etc. How to notice signs when someone is interested in you, especially even at a young age. You have the birds and the bees sort of a discussion.
Particular were particularly forward and kept giving me more gifts than everybody else, and they were constantly feeling like they were obligating me. So they were like, you've received my stuff, so now do you want to go on a date with me, thinking that this is how you impress people. And one of them actually gave me a massive speech about how they were spending all of their dinner money on me, on gifts for me, and I didn't know this, and I didn't ask them to, and that they needed to take some time away from me for themselves, because they've spent all this money and it's not really, it's not really going anywhere or getting them anything. So now, because it hasn't got them anywhere, they feel like they have to take some space from me so that they can spend their money on their food and have, just take some time for themselves. I was like, what the fuck? So these guys were taking bets on who would get to date me first, and the first one that I actually took an interest in, this is before.
Now, I would want to know at some point, like, just observable reality kind of takes over, right? And you would realize after one or two experiences, now she's talking about these experiences when she was young. At some point when you're a kid and then you get a little bit older, you start to realize that your reality that you're observing with your own eyes from your own experience is letting you know that these young men who are doing all these things for you, that they're just doing it because they're interested in you. And so at what point did she realize that, okay, if that when young men are doing this for me, it's typically because they're interested in me? You learned that at a young age. She realized that she learned that as a young age. The experiences that she refers to and beyond in this video are overwhelmingly related to when she was a young person. And it just goes to show you that typically young women will use young men from their youth on, right? From their youth on, women will learn through observable reality how to use men, especially when they're even when they're young, to get attention, which is like their, what they really enjoy, getting a lot of attention from a lot of these young men. Whereas parents or parents would teach young women in a healthy way that you shouldn't do that. Don't use individuals, right? A good parent will teach their children not to use people for what they're willing to give you, because you know that this person, right? Because you know these people have an interest in you. You should tell them to stop, right? Stop taking their gifts, stop taking the things that they give to you, because you realize from your experience that most of these individuals probably are interested in you. And if you don't share that same sort of an interest, then all you're doing is giving off, the wrong signs, right? That's something that we've heard of for a long time, that people think, oh, you did this, and so it gave me the impression that you were interested in me. And I'll talk about an experience that way, where I had an old girlfriend from way back, and there was a guy that was interested in her. She lived out in New Jersey, and he was like, she told me that she was interested in her, and I didn't care, because if I would just move on to somebody else, and that bothered her. She was, it bothered her that I was very nonchalant about whether or not other guys were interested in her, because I didn't care, because I could just find another girlfriend. And so she would always talk about that. She would try to weaponize that other individual to try to make me jealous, and I just not the jealous type. And so she told me one day about the same thing, that he came over, he brought flowers to her for whatever reason, and I was just like, well, are you going to keep them? And she was like, well, yeah, why not? They were just a gift. And I was like, well, yeah, but you know that he's interested in you, so if you accept that person's flowers, it's as if you're accepting, that person. It's as if you're accepting that person's advances towards you, and he knows that you're dating me, and of course you are dating me. So why would you? And this was someone that I dated in the church, and so I was like, why would you accept that? And eventually, I ended up breaking up with her after that night. But then later on, of course, she came up to me and told me of another experience where, that she was basically just using that individual. She had a flat tire, and I was like, she called him to come give her a hand. And this is what young women do. When women don't have a strong male in their life, they will use their femininity to get things done, right? She like my ex-girlfriend, she would use men that she knew, her orbiters, and she would be like, oh, I got, I needed a car repair, or I got a flat tire, or can you give me a lift, etc.
Before I knew the mentality behind it all and what they were thinking and planning and all this shit, he he actually asked me to come home with him one day. So I did, and I thought we were going to play computer games or something. And I walked into his room, and it was just plastered with porn, like cutouts from magazines and newspapers, just titties everywhere, right? And a bed and a cupboard, and that's it. That was all that was in his room. And he said, oh, you look cold. Can I get you a jacket? And he opens up his wardrobe, and inside it's all lined with porn. Like, it's like a little wank cabin. Like, it's so...
And like, just like listening to this experience, I would be like, where were your parents? Like, where was your father, right? Like, didn't your parents teach you not to go home with strange boys? And the whole experience sounds like the individual is older. Now, she says that she was 11 years old during this experience, because mind you, what 10 or 11-year-old boy is going to be slick enough to be like, hey, you look cold, why don't you? And that don't even make oh.
Weird. Like, why is the inside, like, you've got porn visible from every angle possible. There is no way you could look with, if you have a 360 kind of stimulus going on, why do you need it inside your cupboard? But anyway, so he pulls out this jacket, and then he sits on the bed and he pats the bed. Like, he gets under the covers and he pats the space next to him, and I'm just like, and I run out. I think I was like 11.
And again, like she said, I think I was like 11. What 11-year-old boy's got tight game like that?
And he had very low self-esteem. He was very isolated, and he didn't really have a lot of confidence in himself, and he felt very flawed and very worthless. And he would constantly be nice to me all the time.
Do you sense a theme here of the type of men that she keeps interacting with? Again, from her youth on, right? So she's a person, because of her Tourette's, probably didn't have a lot of young female friends, right? People probably made fun of her, etc., right? And I have no doubt some of the more popular boys did the exact same thing. So this is literally a story of sweet Anita's exploitation of men from her youth till now.
And I ignored so many warning signs. I think like he was like the one of the biggest examples of all the tick boxes. So I had a partner when I first started talking to him, and he was a bit of a white knight, like really severely a white knight. Like, he spent most of his day arguing with people on Facebook in defense of women. And I'm all for dudes supporting women and their rights and all that sort of stuff, but this dude was very clearly doing it for all the approval it got him. Because there were so many women who'd pat him on the back and be like, oh my god, yes! And it's so good to see a person with a penis saying it! And he was just like, finally, female attention. I saw him on Facebook, and I befriended him for other reasons, but I clocked that behavior early on. And that wasn't why.
Now, it's very important to pay attention to what comes next. She befriended this individual. She had a boyfriend, right? As she said, she was dating somebody else and she came across this other individuals. And then she says, I befriended him for other reasons. I want you to pay attention real close to the story.
I engaged with him, but the thing is, before you judge me for being friends with him despite seeing that, I kind of see that most people have flaws. I don't see it as a reason not to be friends with people. I just see it as the thing you have to navigate in order to be a good friend. And he came to visit for like 2 days and then went back up to his place up country. He was like really like, wow, I had so much fun, guys, that was amazing. And I was really glad that it came off the way it did. And then a few weeks later, I decided to break up with my boyfriend at the time. I'd been with him for about 6 years, but he was getting a bit too much. And that was nothing to do with that guy visiting. But the guy assumed immediately that that it must have been because he visited and he impressed me so much, and it must have been because of him. And so he sent me this really, really long-winded kind of like, I'm in love with you message. And I was just like, oh no. And I was stressed and my heart was pounding because like he was one of my few friends. And he still assumed that like there was this queuing system and, you know, he was next in line. And because we talk a lot, he obviously is the next person.
Did you hear her utilize that exact same expression again? Right? Queued up for the next in line.
In line sort of thing. And it was just, So that happened. And I gave him a really delicate letdown that was just like, I'm demisexual, I tend to take a long time to connect with people, I just don't feel like we've connected in that way at all, I'm really sorry, I hope that you'll still be my friend after that. And he was like, yeah, that's totally fine. And we carried on talking as normal. So he moved in, and he seemed to have outlined that he didn't have any romantic expectations.
So did you hear that? Did you hear what she just said? So that guy that she relayed that whole experience about then moved in.
And that happened, and everything seemed fine. But then sometimes I'd come home and there was alcohol and chocolates on my bed in my room out of nowhere. And I was like, at first I was like, oh, that's really sweet. And then sometimes my rabbits would be cleaned out. I'd come back from volunteering all day and all night. I'd have 1 hour before I had to go back out there again, and I need to brush my teeth, I need to have a shower, I need to groom, I need to pack my food, I need to clean the rabbits, I need to sort out the stick insects, and then I need to get back out again. And basically that kept happening, and it was really awkward and a lot of pressure. The reason why it was awkward and pressure and not actually really lovely was because I started to detect there was like romantic interest behind it. And so I sat him down a few times and I went, it's really nice that you're cooking.
And again, this is the same experience all over again, right? Like, why would you be shocked that this person who wrote you a letter and was like, I'm interested in you, would then not do it again after they moved into your apartment? And this is what I said, that this is, even though she labels this I dated a simp cringy stories, this is the cringy story of how sweet Anita from her youth till now uses men. Basically the story of her life and the story of many women's lives.
Me food, and like, cause I'd come home and he'd have cooked like some food and he'd be like, this is because I believe in what you do to ease the burden. At first I thought that was really sweet, but as things got weirder and weirder, I got really nervous about eating it. If a friend cooks you a meal, it's awesome and you eat the meal together. If a simp cooks you a meal, you feel this heavy weight, this heavy burden of pressure and expectation, like, you like me now, right? You like me now, right? You're gonna suck my dick, right? This counts on my stamp card, right? And you can feel that even if they're denying that that's the case, even if they go, that's not what's happening here. You can feel it fizzling, this desperation underneath it, and it's really scary.
So again, like I said, she's learned this from her youth, even as a kid. She said that she learned that from her experience with young men. So then, from a male's perspective, why would you keep interacting with men on that level when you realize that when men are typically doing these things for you, it's because they're interested in it? And it's just because at the end of the day, you're just using them, whether it's for attention or meals or chores that you might need them to get to do because she doesn't have a man in her life. She chose to broke up with that man, right? She was in a relationship, broke up with that man. More than likely that guy was living with her, which is why the other guy ended up moving in. And you'll hear later on in the story how that guy was going to break, who's going to leave. And again, this is the story I dated a simp, right? So this guy that she's referring to is the story of her dating, right? So even though she says that there was no romantic relationship, the damn fucking name of the video was called I Dated a Simp.
And it just ruins the friendship and the interaction, and you feel like kind of fed up with it, and you feel like a terrible person for being fed up with it. Like, there's this kind of like, you're being nice to me and I so want to be nice back, but because of the context of this situation, I just feel exasperated. And you feel guilty for just being like, ugh. He was overly generous, and I sat him down and was like, could you stop? Because this feels like it's with intentions and I don't want to indulge them. And he was like, yeah, okay, I can stop. I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable. It's not with intentions, don't worry. And I was like, cool. But he didn't stop. And so I stopped eating the food he made and things like that. And he started throwing tantrums. Well, he didn't throw tantrums, he just got angry. He was like, I feel kind of like I'm trying to be your friend and I'm making you food and you're not eating any of it. And it's like, yeah, I told you to stop. And he's like, oh yeah, my bad, sorry. And then he'd keep doing it. And then I started going to parties with my friends who volunteered, and I was like, yay, social life. And I was really happy, and I'd come home buzzing like, oh my God, I'm.
And again, like I said, like I said in the very beginning, that she refers to these, and these are the people that she targets, right? She targets these people. This is her social circle, right? The reason that she attracts these people is because that's what she is, right? Which is why you hear her expression of, I have friends, yay, right? Because normally, probably she has a hard time making friends because she herself is also socially awkward, right? But from her perspective, just listening to her, you're literally listening to the exploitation of someone that she probably made to feel like she had some sort of interest in this individual. Again, she learned that behavior from her youth on. She learned how to exploit men for her own needs. And this is basically, and even though and this is someone that she dated, because the damn video's name is called I Dated a Simp Cringy Stories.
I'm making friends, I'm doing the thing. And he would he'd send me angry messages like, once again you've left me in the dust and the dirt. And I'll be like, what? And it's like, well, you're getting off to gallivant and these parties while I'm at home alone. And I was like, what? And he was like, I had this understanding that if I moved in with you, that you would introduce me to all of your friends and tell them that I was awesome and fluff me up and tell them that I was amazing, and I'd be able to waltz in and they'd be like, hey, it's you, and they'd all like me and I'd have friends. And I was like,
right? Did you hear what she said? This was the deal, right? So much fuckery going on, so much usury. So she's using him, and then from her own expression, you hear what he wanted, right? He was basically trying to utilize her to get in with another social group, right? So this is what she the way she explains it is, she's like, I don't even know why he had this mindset, but from her own acknowledgement, she acknowledges that why was he led into thinking these things, because that's what she misled him to believe.
you never told me that, and that's kind of a weird thing to expect from a roommate. And also, I did tell you that I was barely ever gonna see you, that we were probably gonna say hello in the morning when we head off to work, and that was about it. Like, where did all this come from? And so he started making demands to... He wanted to be a part of my business and help me with my business. He wanted to come out volunteering with me, and he got upset if I didn't invite him to everything I did socially. And I didn't invite him to do anything socially. In fact, I asked him specifically to stay away from my social life because he was acting so strangely. He was very obsessive. If I went out late at night, it didn't matter whether he had work the next day, he'd stay awake vigilantly waiting for me to come home, just to know that I came home safe. And it's like, I'm an adult woman, I'm cool, you're not responsible for my safety or welfare. What I get up to has nothing to do with you, and I feel a bit odd with you needing to know when I leave the house and when I'm home, seeing as you are just someone that is a roommate, and everything about that kind of almost invades my privacy. And to a point, I stopped wanting to talk to him about who I was friends with or who I'd been hanging out with, and he always kept trying to guess. He'd look over my shoulder when I was buying things or hunting for things to look, to use for rescue work and stuff, and he would overly invest in my life. He was the one who, when I borrowed his laptop to transfer some files, I looked in the recycling folder because I accidentally deleted the files, and I opened the first folder I found, thinking it would be my folder, and it turned out to be a folder called Motivation, and it was loads of pictures of me with my ex cropped out of the photo that he'd taken from my social media. He wasn't a narcissist, in fact he had quite low self-esteem. He was just really trying to connect and kind of bungling it, and I had a lot of sympathy and I had a lot of patience with it because I knew what it was to not quite be able to read the room, and I knew what it was to really want a connection, and I knew he was really demanding, but he just didn't understand. And so I sat down with him and I said, I'm really afraid to upset the balance because I need to share rent with somebody.
Again, that she said, I need to share rent with somebody, right? So she's talking about the same story. And then she says that she sympathizes with him because she understands how it feels like to not be able to read the room in terms of socially awkward behavior, while at the same time not being able to read the room when it comes to the overt expressions of what she says are unwanted, right? It's like, this is like most of westernized females, right? They just have like these orbiters that they utilize when they don't have the man that they want. They'll find a man to fit in for the moment and basically use that man until they find somebody else.
And you're one of the few people that I would dare to invite into my home, so I kind of want to make this work, but at the same time, you're making demands to be a part of everything in my life. And he was like, I just want to prove myself to you, because you turned me down, but I feel like we can change it around and we can be together if you could just see that I'm an awesome guy, and I can't do that unless you let me hang out with you. And so like I was like, well, no, you don't understand. You can't just make someone like you. A year after I turned him down and gone through this in circles over and over again, I said to him, you've been acting very strangely this past year towards me, and we've kind of battled with that a bit, but I'm thinking about trying to date. I think I've moved on since my ex, and I think I'm ready to find someone new.
What did I say? What did I say?
And he was like, if you date anyone, I'll make you homeless. I don't care. Like, I love living with you, but I am out, and I don't care what happens to you if you get a boyfriend. I was like, you swore down that you were my friend. You swore down that you were over it. Like, yeah. And now you know this position that you're in, and that you have a position of power, and you're using it to control me. How do you think that looks? And he sat there.
The fucking hypocrisy, right? Like the fucking hypocrisy of listening to this woman and being like, and being like, because the roles are just now reversed. Because he's just like, he's realized that he's wasted all this time, you know, trying to get her to like him in that way. Even though that's more than likely how the relationship started. Because as she said, she broke up with her boyfriend. That guy moved out. The simp moved in to basically fulfill the financial role, right? And then now she's got a little bit of courage because now maybe because of her new group of friends, she's met another guy that she's probably interested in, and now she's trying to move this one out, but not just yet, because she hasn't found the new simp to move in to fulfill that financial role. While at the same time talking about using that, now she's feeling like he's using. Oh, fucking can't make this shit up.
There in silence, and I thought, I'll wait. We can sit here and I'll wait. And 20 minutes went by in silence, and I thought any minute now he's gonna take that back and go, yeah, that was kind of bullshit. And it didn't happen. Like, he just sat there for 20 minutes, just like, yeah. And I was like, wait, think it through. You're not this kind of person. And he's like, I just don't want to get used. I just don't want to be used. I don't want to be taken for a chump. And I was like, how would you be used? And he was like, well, I buy you all this stuff and I do all this stuff for you, and then you just shit all over me and date someone else. And I was like, but I didn't ask you to do any of that stuff. So how am I obligated to, how do I owe you singleness? And he was like, yeah, you're right. I need to tone it down.
And again, I still go back to the very same premise of the video is I dated a simp. So when she talks about how do I owe you singleness, well, this story is just, it's a fluid story about the same person, right? She had the one story about the kids, the young nerdy boys when she was a kid in elementary school. The weird experience of being 11 and walking into a guy's room who had his room plastered with porn. And what other 10 or 11-year-old kid has his room plastered with porn? In my opinion, that was probably someone who had their own apartment, who was a adult 18, 16, 17, 18 years old. I highly doubt that a young kid that from her school, like their parents were just like, fucking have at it, right? No, I don't believe that shit for a minute. More than likely, she got herself involved with a much older guy, and when she walked into his flat, she was like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong spot. I need to get the fuck up out of here. So again, going back to what she said was, like, why would he feel that she's obligated to accept all of his advances and act more girlfriend like? It's because she fucking said it. I dated a simp. So you're dating this person, even though she doesn't want to admit that on the video. But she titled the fucking video, I dated a simp.
I'm sorry, I take it back. I won't do that. And I was like, okay, so you're sure. So to outline, if I get a partner, you're not going to make me homeless, right? Everything's cool. And whether I have a partner or not is not going to define how you behave, right? And he went, yeah. And I was like, cool. And I was about to leave the conversation and he went, well, maybe. I was like, ah! Yeah, that situation was hard and it was awkward, but his jealousy tended to get to frenzy point, and eventually he had enough, and he, for his own mental health, ended up, leaving, and I ended up living with someone who was a bit more mellow, and that was helpful. And yeah, it all fell apart. The friendship fell apart. He was being too pushy. It was just a mess. So all I'd say is, if you're gonna learn anything from this, it's totally normal to feel thirsty. It's totally normal.
And I would say it's definitely not normal to feel thirsty. And I don't believe her story as being the story of a man who was simping over her. More than likely, what happened was, for whatever reason, she broke up. More than likely, her boyfriend broke up with her because she required him to be there financially, right? She required that man to be there financially, and he probably got tired of her shit and he said, fuck it, I'm out. So she was like, oh shit, I'm gonna be homeless. Hey, there's that simp that lives upstairs. Let's invite him downstairs and pretend to be the girlfriend. And then she realized that she didn't want to go that route, but she was like, I already got him. And so he was like, well, wait a minute. You dragged my ass down here. You told me this, that, and the other. And now you're not living up to your end of the bargain. And so this is the story, again, like I said in the beginning, of sweet Anita and how from her youth on, she talks about all these different stories when she was a kid about how she manipulates men and how this is what women do. This is what a lot of women do. They learn by just their life experience that men who are interested in them will do things for them. And they just realize, oh shit, I can get stuff done in life just by being pretty, just by having a pair of boobs and being girly, and people will do things for me. Shit, that's a pretty sweet deal. And so of course she then turns around and blames this whole story upon, on the men, and that these men are weird, etc. But it's really just a story of exploitation.